if you are able to record, thank you. Awesome. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Accessible Joys of Backyard Birding Workshop for Birdability Week 2023. Welcome to Birdability Week overall. We're so excited that you're here. My name's Kat Fridley, and I'm the Executive Director here at Birdability. I'm a white, middle-aged, and multiply disabled queer femme with purple hair in 2 buns, and tonight I'm wearing sparkly rhinestone cat-eye glasses and sparkly earrings. Behind me are a whole lot of plants and a red wall. And I am really thrilled to get us started tonight. In order to create virtual access for as many folks as possible, we have ASL interpretation and captions for this event. To generate captions, you can just go to the bar at the bottom and click on the one that says CC and put show captions. We'll also be using audio descriptions for any visuals that are shared, as you heard when I introduced myself. We welcome you to have your camera on during this event, but due to the number of us participating, we ask that you remain muted unless you raise your hand and are called on. We're going to ask you all a couple of questions, and we're going to ask you to put information into the chat when we do that. But we do ask that folks be mindful about not overwhelming the chat with other kinds of things, because we have folks who are using screen readers, and that can get a little bit loud. The other thing that I will tell you is for folks who are using screen readers, we did enable the setting that allows you to disable chat being read out loud. We encourage you to let us know if there's something that we can do to make this session more accessible to you, or that we can do moving forward in general. We're all learning every day about how to create access and inclusion for each other. And we definitely want to model. Not a single one of us knows how to do that for everyone. So we welcome your feedback. I'm so grateful that you all are here and that you're a part of this growing birdability community. We are an organization that has been working to create access in birding community and in public lands. Birdability is a national not-for-profit that was founded by Virginia Rose in 2018. We became a nonprofit in 2021, and we've been working to share the joys of birding with disabled folks ever since, and working to ensure that birding is accessible for everybody. As you might have heard us say, we believe deeply that birding and the outdoors is for absolutely everybody. Birdability Week is a week-long celebration. You all are joining us for our first official non-launch event, and we are excited to connect all week with birders with disabilities to create community around our work towards access and inclusion. And we want to acknowledge that this celebration, it draws inspiration and builds on other really cool inclusive celebrations, such as Black Birders Week, Latino Conservation Week, and Let's Go Birding Together. And we absolutely can't do this without your support. So thanks to every single one of you who has donated, sponsored, volunteered, or otherwise showed up for Birdability over the last 4 years. You all are why we're here. I do want to say particularly thank you to the Birdability captains, who have been the folks that have been the beating heart of this organization. We work together every step of the way to create Birdability Week, and I am so excited now to get to celebrate it with you all. I also want to thank our sponsors, in particular our primary bald eagle sponsor, the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. They have made so much possible this week, including our ASL access. And I want to say thank you to Pro Bono ASL for providing ASL interpreters for this event. Our board is made up of some of the most delightful and engaged advocates for access that you will ever meet. And I'm really lucky to get to do this work with them. I'm going to turn it over for just a minute to Maggie Dwayne, who's going to talk to you a little bit about a hope that we have that you might want to get involved in the leadership of this organization too.
Thanks so much, Kat. So hello, everyone. I'm Maggie, she, her pronouns. I'm a cisgender female in her mid-30s this evening wearing a dark sweater against a virtual Zoom background featuring the Birdability logo. I am a member of the Birdability Board of Directors, which is an incredible and small team of people who have become my very dear friends, and we are looking to expand and enhance our team. Our board plays a very supportive, guiding role in Birdability's work. So if by the end of this program, you're feeling energized and like you want to contribute to this work in a guiding way, our board is accepting applications through December 1st, and we will be dropping in a link to our application in this chat. So if our mission resonates with you, please consider applying, even if you don't meet every qualification. And that's because diverse perspectives and life experiences make us stronger, and we absolutely know that that could include you. So thank you, Taylor, for including a link in the chat, and I will hand it back to Kat so that we can enjoy
Yeah.
tonight's program.
Yeah, and with that, I'm actually going to introduce Heather Weber-Langvardt, who's our first speaker tonight. Welcome, Heather, and thank you so much for all of your work and for taking us through tonight some of the accessible joys of backyard birding.
Thank you. My name is Heather. I am a woman in my 30s with red hair and glasses, and I have windows behind me, so I don't think you could see anything in my background. But I own a birding store in Colorado, and so I'm going to kind of go over some of the basics of bird feeding and some ideas on how to set up your oasis in your yard. And I know that you're going to get so much information today, tons of ideas and glimpses into what the other panelists and I do in our own yards. But I just kind of want to emphasize that there's no wrong way to feed the birds. You need to keep things clean and safe for your birds, but past that, you can do it however works best for you. I own a store, so I'm always experimenting in my yard, but you can go as fancy and high tech as you want or as low tech as works for you. And you can also do it on any scale. So, there's opportunities if you just have a balcony apartment or if you have acres of space. So, one of the easiest ways is, just a pot of native plants that you can do in any amount of space. And they have minimal upkeep since natives are hardy and water friendly. Any amount of water attracts a variety of species to your yard, and just one feeder can attract birds and encourage them to stay around. So on the note of feeders, we're going to drop some food preference guides into the chat. So there'll be one for the east and the west of the US. So kind of check those out and get an idea of what'll work for you and the birds that you see. And just like with human food, quality does matter for bird food, and you get what you pay for. So there's some things like sunflower that's really universal. But there's also a lot of food that you can get that has fillers and things that the birds don't like, grains, Milo, and those can also cause the issues that usually stop people from feeding. So, if the birds are digging through that food to find what they're looking for and drop a bunch of seed on the ground, that's what starts to attract mice or cause weeds to grow in your yard. So, try to stay away from those kinds of things. So what I kind of really want to talk about is what's fun for me, which is setting up a feeder system in your yard. So this slide kind of shows what I have. You'll see that my yard is actually very small. Only the rock area by the house is mine. Everything else is kind of a community yard, but I've moved into it and taken over too. So in the far right photo, you can see a pole system that I put up in the rocks in my own yard, which we'll talk about some of those feeders later. And then you can see that there's some feeders attached to the fence in the background. And that's actually where I started, because in my yard, it's really windy. And so that was the easiest way for me to attach feeders that weren't going to blow away and cause issues. So I've got one that's nailed to a fence post, and then a couple that are tied on that have cakes of seed in them. And then in the top photo is a small oak tree that's actually in the community yard. but it's the easiest thing to see from my house, which is one of the important things because that's part of why we do this, is for the joy of seeing the birds ourselves. So in that tree, there is a feeder with a red roof and some chains hanging around it that has a solid cylinder of seed in it. And then next to it is a suet feeder that's kind of tied to the tree. So again, those are kind of sturdy so that they stay out of the wind, but they're the kinds of food that I can leave out all the time. So that's kind of what I call a foundational feeder. So that's going to hold seed all the time. The birds know that it's there and they can rely on it. And then on the bottom left is a photo of a pine tree that's got several feeders in it, lots of colorful ones. And those hold more treat-like foods like mealworms, thistle, and jelly. And so I chose that tree because it's more protected. It's a lot harder for me to see, but it's kind of better for the birds. And I think we can drop into the chat also a document that talks about the 12 elements for thoughtful feeding. And that will kind of talk about some of those foundational feeders and some other things. So I'm not going to go through every aspect of it, but if you look through it, you'll see that, you know, I'm sure all of us kind of use those in our yards. So if we move on to the next slide, it kind of focuses on that pole system from earlier. So on the far left photo is a tray feeder with a blue roof that's inside of a green cage and hangs just above the ground. And so I created that for feeding ground feeding birds while keeping pigeons away because I have a lot of them and they cause some problems. So they are something that I take into consideration in all my feeders. And you'll see a lot of things with cages or chains hanging around them that helps keep my pigeon population down so that my little birds can enjoy. So that feeder hangs about 10 inches off the ground. And so that also helps keep the pigeons out and keeps it clean underneath. And then the roof helps keep everything dry. And then the next photo in the bottom middle shows the specialty feeders higher up on the pole. So on the left is a black tray feeder with a blue roof and more of those copper chains hanging around it. And I usually use it for fruits and small nuts, which bring in smaller birds like chickadees and nuthatches. And the blue weather guard keeps it dry and also helps keep the larger birds out. And then so does the chains. And then next to that is a green feeder with a cage that holds peanuts in the shell. And so that's great for larger birds like corvids, you know, jays, magpies, those kind of birds that love the peanuts in the shell. And then in the top photo are two feeders. One is kind of red and lantern shaped. And the other is black and white and kind of looks like an aspen log. And those are both also foundational feeders that are always full of seed. So the red feeder holds a solid seed cylinder and the black and white tube holds loose seed. And both of those attract pretty much all, you know, seed-eating birds. I get finches and red-winged blackbirds and chickadees and all kinds on that. And then finally on the right is a picture of my camera feeder, which is from Beakview, who donated the one we're giving away later today. And it sits on a pole by itself. It's also caged to keep out the big birds in my yard. And it's orange and white, holds loose seed, and then has a solar panel underneath. And that one I put close to the house because I don't have to see it all the time because I can see that feed from anywhere. And that's been one of my absolute favorite additions because I get to see the birds that I don't see all the time while I'm at work or on vacation. You know, I get to see the migrants that only drop by once. So it's absolutely my favorite. And then the next slide is going to show bird baths. So there are 3 there. 2 of them are round and have a copper disc in the middle. And the third one is kind of leaf shaped and is made from copper. And I have to say that water is like my #1 tip for attracting birds. No matter where you live or what you're doing, you know, birds need water. So you will get species that don't need your feeders. You will get birds that stay around longer. It's just the very best thing to bring any bird to your yard. And then one of mine, the one in the top that's brown, is also heated. So I can plug it in during cold months to ensure that I always have a supply of open water for my birds. And then the reason for the copper discs is that it keeps them free of bacteria, virus, funguses, algae. So that's a kind of recent addition and an absolute game changer. So I have that in all of mine except for the one that's made from copper. So I think that's just a wonderful way to keep them clean. And we'll talk a little more about cleaning later. And then my last slide is some native plants. So they show some native wildflowers around my house. These pictures were taken a little later in the season, but you can still see yellow sunflowers, red and orange blanket flowers, and purple penstemon blooming in them. And then in the far right photo, you can see a sign saying Certified Wildlife Habitat. And that's a certification from the National Wildlife Federation, excuse me. And anyone can go to their website and register their space. And what they require is water, food, shelter, and places to raise their young. And then they want sustainable practices like no pesticides and native plant use. And even my tiny yard, I was able to do all of that. And the native plants attract finches that eat sunflower and goldenrod seeds, hummingbirds, and bees and butterflies. So that's an awesome way, even if you live somewhere where you can't put up feeders, native plants are a wonderful way to feed. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about cleaning. If you do offer bird feeders or baths, you kind of have to make a commitment to keeping them clean for your birds, just like you do with your own house or your own food spaces. We're lucky here in Colorado, it's really sunny and dry, so it's a lot easier for me to keep everything clean and free of like molds and mildews. If you live somewhere that's really wet, you might have to do more cleaning than I do. But I rinse or wipe down my baths and feeders anytime I fill them. And I deep clean everything, maybe 4 times a year, every 3 months or so. And I use a 50-50 solution of white vinegar and water. That's a great natural way to do it. And then I just make sure that everything's rinsed fully and dried completely before I put them back out and fill them. If you ever do happen to see a sick bird, then you need to do a little more thorough cleaning. So I recommend removing everything, cleaning it well with 1 part bleach to 10 parts water, and then leaving your feeders down for about 2 weeks. That'll help the sick birds disperse and get everything safe again before you put your feeders back out. So that's kind of the greatest way to set up a good oasis so that you can enjoy your bird feeding. And then when you're putting up like a pole system, you're also going to want to think about where you want it to be visible from your house or from your favorite place to sit outside. And you want to make sure that it's going to be somewhere that's accessible to you year round. So, think about when it gets snowy or rainy, is that still going to be a good spot that you can get to clean and fill your feeders? And then we want to ask a question in the chat. So we want to talk about what your biggest bird feeding surprise is. So, what feeder did you put up that attracted something you didn't expect, or, let us know.
And then as we have you all share in the chat about your biggest feeder surprises, I think that's also our key to transition from Heather. Thank you for all of that, to Eric. And I did put in the chat for folks, thank you for the questions. I'm making notes of them, and we'll make sure to try to address all of them that we can at the end of our time here today. And if not, I bet Heather, Eric, and Mark would also be willing to answer those in writing, and I can send them out via email.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Eric, I think we're turning it over to you.
Okay, awesome. Well, great to meet, You meet everyone virtually here. My name's Eric Clow. I'm a volunteer captain with Birdability. I'm also a writer and a birder living in Austin, Texas. I live here with my wife and our two corgis. And you know, a bit about my disability. I have muscular dystrophy, which for the most part means that I use a big power wheelchair and I rely on caregivers for most of my activities of daily living. Um, to describe myself here, I'm a 37-year-old white man with a thick beard that's peppered with silver and gray hairs, and I've got my hair kind of pulled back into a man bun. Um, cool. So we'll move on here. So I'm going to be sharing my top 5 accessible joys of backyard birding. And in this photo here, you'll see my backyard in its very green and unruly spring phase. There's a large sycamore tree and a crepe myrtle tree and a rose bush that's obscuring a tool shed. And there's an arbor there that's wrapped in wisteria vines. So the first joy of accessible backyard birding for me is that it requires neither transportation nor a lot of money. You know, a lot of people with disabilities experience poverty or they live on fixed income. Um, Still, other people with disabilities are not able to drive. And, you know, so both of these things can cause major impediments to disabled folks getting out and birding because, you know, if you rely on paratransit doesn't go to all the places where you might like to bird. And you know, and if you have a van like myself and rely on a caregiver to drive you, well, you need to pay the caregiver for your time. And so that can very quickly add up. Thankfully, birds are everywhere and our backyards are no exception, even a small backyard like the one you saw that Heather was sharing, like, you know, attracts great birds. And so, you know, there's a lot of really cool stuff that we can see in our backyards. On the left is an image of myself at my back door with my two corgis, and we're all watching birds together. And on the right-hand side is an indigo bunting, just absolute brilliant blue songbird that is picking seeds out of our hanging seed tray in the backyard. And, you know, what's so cool to me about seeing this indigo bunting was I didn't need to go anywhere to see. I literally was just watching from my window, and it's my best views I've ever gotten of an indigo bunting. And I didn't have to work very hard to get that. So that was really cool. Moving on to the next joy. Backyard birding accommodates our physical and mental abilities and our limitations. And so, you know, one thing I just touched on was transportation issues. Well, not only is it difficult is it expensive for me to drive around town, but it also wears me out physically. Rolling up in the ramp into the van and rolling out of the van, you know, the bumps along a road, especially if it's a country road like that, I'll get worn out before I even get to the birding location. Well, you know, my backyard perfectly accommodates that limitation. Plus, I'm not able to use binoculars, and the backyard offers a place where I can see and hear the birds up close. They come, you know, within feet of the back window. Here on the left is a photo of myself. I'm underneath our sycamore tree, and there's some green bird baths on the ground and native sage plants around. And on the right is one of the coolest birds that I've gotten to see in our backyard, a Savannah sparrow. And for the last 2 years, we've been lucky enough to have up to 5 Savannah sparrows foraging for seeds on the ground. And they, you know, pick up seeds that either have fallen out of the feeders, and occasionally will toss some seed out into the grass away from the house to try to avoid getting rats and that sort of thing. But yeah, seeing Savannah sparrows, I mean, I've been within 5 feet of a Savannah sparrow and been able to, you know, pick out that little yellow, field mark above the eye, just with my naked eye, which just feels like a really rare treat. So joy number 3 is that we can access the mental health benefits of birding without exhausting our bodies. I think a lot of us can empathize with this idea that, time in nature is very therapeutic. It really boosts our mental health. When you have a physical disability like the kind that I have that results in chronic fatigue and pain, it's really hard to access those mental health benefits without paying a tremendous physical price. A lot of times I'll go out birding in the morning for an hour or two, and then I have to spend the rest of the day in bed to recover from that. Well, again, the backyard is a place where I can access the joy of birds without wrecking my body, and I really appreciate that. On the left here, you'll see a squirrel buster feeder, which I'll be honest, does not always bust the squirrels. They're often squirrels still get in there and get the seeds, but there's a lesser goldfinch and an American goldfinch. The American goldfinch is molting into its brilliant breeding plumage at that time. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a painted bunting, which is one of Texas's favorite birds. It's got a blue head, green back and wings, and a red body. And these are both taken in our backyard. And again, I'm seeing these really amazing birds getting great views just in my backyard, which is so cool. Okay, joy number 4 is that birding in the backyard deepens our connection to the land we inhabit, as well as our place in the ecosystem. Birds really are a gateway. And once you start noticing birds, you begin to notice other kinds of wildlife. You begin to notice the plants and the trees, the flowers, the insects, the flying beetles, the different kinds of lizards, and I feel more in tune with the seasons as well when I watch birds. I feel like I'm understanding the seasonal changes in a very visual and visceral kind of way. I can also begin to notice how the climate is impacting those seasons and the wildlife. And as well, I can also kind of notice how there's little micro habitats as well around the yard. So these images, one of my favorite things to watch outside of my bedroom window is the anole lizards. And so on the left, you see a brown anole lizard that's hanging out on the brick wall outside my window. This is a little strange, but hopefully not inappropriate, but I have seen a pair of anole lizards actually copulate on the windowsill, which, it's part of nature. But I had no idea that I would get these like very privileged, very intimate, views of wildlife in and around the yard. But once I started paying attention to birds, I really can't help but notice all of the beauty that nature has to offer. On the right-hand side, we have a very gorgeous monarch butterfly with orange and black and white patterning on the grass. Okay, now I'm going to discuss our final joy and then hopefully take you for a short little virtual tour of the yard. So joy number 5 is that we can form relationships with the birds that visit us. And you're going to hear a lot from Mark today about some very individual relationships with birds. And I mean, it's really amazing what he's going to share with you. But really the bottom line here is that by providing food and water, nesting habitats, native plants and trees, nesting boxes, we can interact with birds in truly profound ways. And when we have the birds, when we attract birds to our yards, we invite, very candid views of their private lives. And this to me is where the magic happens. Here in this image, you'll see a fledgling mourning dove that is tucked away behind the plants right outside of my bedroom window. And this year, we got to see a pair of mourning doves raise their fledglings just right outside of my windows. And, the parents would fly down and they'd, feed the mourning doves and the mourning dove babies. And I couldn't believe that I was just 2 feet away from this incredible, sight, this incredible view, intimate view of bird life. So now I'm going to kind of take you through some photos here of the backyard. On the left-hand side photo, you'll see I've got a feeder station kind of similar to what Heather has, where, there's, again, several hooks that I can hang different feeders on, a little tray. There was a little tray for water as well, but that broke after a while. The Texas sun is brutal. So, and then there's this little squirrel baffle at the bottom, a little cone shaped thing that doesn't always prevent the squirrels from getting at the seeds, but maybe it eliminates half of those visits. And there's a big sage bush right behind that. On the right-hand side, there are a couple of tube feeders. And I should point out that on the left-hand side, that's more of our summer setup. We only have one feeder out during the summer because we don't have a lot of visitors. On the right-hand side, I have multiple tube feeders with a house sparrow and some goldfinches there. So moving on. These are some fun visitors that we sometimes get. 3 green monk parakeets, and they're grabbing seeds from one of our trays. And there are some white-winged doves there as well. And here we have a view of some of the bird baths that I have. On the left-hand side, there's a blue dish with water on the ground for the birds that just like to come to water on the ground. Behind that is a sage plant with some flowers. And on the right-hand side, I have a larger bird bath that actually has a copper pipe that drips water into it. So it kind of simulates what a flowing stream would be like. And there's a monk parakeet sitting there. I will say monk parakeets are endemic to Austin, but they're really, I mean, they're not native obviously, but they are interesting birds to watch in the backyard. One thing I wanted to say here, in this image, you see the 3 large sage plants that are around our bird feeder station. And to me, I think it's important to provide shelter and safety to the birds. And that's kind of what these do. It makes birds that forage on the ground feel safe. And I think it's also important that we keep our yards a little messy, that we leave some of the leaf litter because the birds are also attracted to that. And last thing, I'll make this super fast. So this year, after a few years of not seeing bluebirds come to our bluebird house, we got a pair of bluebirds that raised their young here. And I got a privileged view one afternoon, and I got to see the 3 fledglings take their first flight out of the birdhouse. And, this is just, it's just an amazing experience. And this is the magic that we invite into our lives when we pay attention to birds in our yards and when we provide what birds need. So our question, or the next question that we wanted to pose to folks to drop in the chat is, what has been your most exciting backyard bird visitor? And I'll give an example just to get started, that last summer I was in our pool and I got to see, I think there were 30 Mississippi kites came flying over as part of their migration. And so that's just, a little inspiration for you. I hope you have a chance to find inventive ways to bring birds into your life and that you enjoy some of the magic as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. As we transition between Eric and Mark, I will share my favorite backyard bird. This is Cat. And one of the most amazing experiences that I've had, similar, Eric, to you, is getting to watch a pair of barred owls mate. Well, I didn't get to watch them mate. You had that experience with the lizards. I just got to watch them raise 3 owlets in our yard, barred owlets, which was such an incredible thing, and honestly really hard to do anything except watch and listen and learn from those owls. Oh, great blue heron, somebody said. Okay, Gary shared a magnificent frigate bird is on his yard list. That is a little extreme. A lesser goldfinch family, folks have shared. And black-capped chickadees. So many terrific birds. Oh, Emily says a spotted towhee. And Jamie shared cedar waxwings. All right, Mark, you have the experience of not just feeding birds, but of getting to know birds. And I am excited to have you share with us more about your experience.
Well, thank you, Kat, and thank you to Heather and Eric for getting us going, and thanks for Birdability for pulling this all together. It's really enjoyable. I'm Mark Roser. I live in Connecticut. I'm a white male, getting very close to 60. I've got a hat on to protect the remaining gray hairs that I've got on my head, a baseball cap. And in my background is my door off the kitchen that goes to my deck, which is where I have my work desk and my chair, so I can be at the door, looking out the door at my birds. And as you'll hear, I tend to go outside very frequently. So this is where I'm, when I work from home, this is my happiest space, is next to the door, so I can be paying attention to both work and the birds at the same time. So I'll start off with a picture of the backyard. So this is the backyard, and you'll see here that there is a pole feeder with a cone about 4 feet off the ground with a hook, and on the hook there's just a small tray feeder. This is the summer setup, and you'll see something that you'll think a bit humorous, which is behind that you'll see a chain link fence that is in a dog kennel when my dogs were still alive, that I have since rigged with a little bit of a chain link top and a back to it, so that way the birds could come in and eat from a squirrel-proof feeder. And there's also a fly-through feeder there that allowed me to feed birds with less, when the Cooper hawk or the red-shoulder hawk or the red-tailed hawk are sitting on the branches above them, it gives them a little more ability to come in and eat and get out safely and observe where they want to go before they leave. So when you feed birds, you quote unquote feed other birds too. And so because when you get to know your individual birds, you try to do your best that you can to protect them. So this is my backyard, and I, like Heather said, there's a foundational feeders I have which provide food consistently, specialty feeder, which is I'll be talking about, which is smaller amounts, and then interactive feeders, which are things that you can bring with you. And the way I differentiate these is that, different from tradition, I break with tradition in that what's worked for me has been to provide food many times a day. So I like smaller feeders where I bring out food, preference like 1 or twice an hour. And what that means is that when the birds have a small amount, they finish it, so that when I go back out the door, they hear the door open and close, and that means that more food is coming. And so it becomes, instead of the sound of me going outdoors being a reason for birds to fly away, it becomes a signal for birds that are in proximity to know that there's food available and that they can come in. And by doing that, I develop more trust and I spend more time outdoors. So what I'll be sharing with you is just one way that's worked for me that I wanted to share with you about how I was able to get to know birds on more of an individual basis. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. And then, so the next slide is a picture of my driveway in the front yard. And what you see here is what I call my feeding tree. I also call it my chickadee tree. And in front of it, it's a red maple that has in bloom in the summertime. In front of it in the driveway, there's about 15 potted plants that I've been growing. And so there I've been growing natives either from cuttings or by buying bare root trees. And then every year I try to put in 10 to 15 bare root trees. I've learned since to grow them up in the driveway for the first year. And when they drop their leaves in the fall, I can go and put these out in the woods, and I can go into my property, or I also have been known to go into the forest to put up elm trees and other native species that we've lost and try to restore some native plants and pawpaw and viburnum and cherry trees, for example. So, and this has come, and the reason I'm putting this as my second slide is really just to show my appreciation for the birds that has come from getting to know them better. And so one of the things, as you get to know your birds, not your birds, but as you get to know the birds better, then you have more of a desire to be helpful and to reach out and to care for things. So we care for the things that we love. And that as we get closer, it gives me more inspiration to care more. Planting and growing natives to plant in the woods and in the forest is one way I can show that provides a better and improved habitat. I'll give a recommendation here. If you're looking to learn more from that, there is a new trend. We've seen butterfly gardens for years. Look up bird gardening, and one thing you can look up there is what they call keystone plants for birds. And there'll be many websites that will teach you about what plants are the best feeders. For example, oaks are known as the greatest feeders of birds because they host 400 species of caterpillars, which attract a whole range of birds. So it's a big field of learning that I've been enjoying learning more about. So as we go down, I'll talk about first my primary feeders. I mentioned what Heather called the foundational feeders. And there's two types, and I divide them among my tree feeding birds and my ground feeding birds, just as Heather did. My tree feeding birds, I consistently use black oil sunflower. It's the easiest for me to put out, and that's why I put out. And my primary feeder is generally away from the house. It's more secluded, a bit harder for me to see, but a bit more private and protected for the birds to reach. So if there's a passerby coming in, they feel safe and can access it. This feeder I keep full, and it's 24/7. The bears have knocked it down once, but it got put back up again, so I don't keep it very high up off the ground. And the squirrels, yes, the squirrels do access this, but I've learned to appreciate the squirrels too, even though it's a squirrel proof, it's better called squirrel resistant. Then for ground feeders, I put food right on the ground, and I put it in different places on different days of the week. It gets me out, and that makes sure that it's in a protected spot close to shelter. So birds, I always try to think, if I were a bird, where would I want to eat? And so I try to put it in the wintertime close to shelter. In the summer, I'm careful that it's not protecting snakes that could eat the bird. So I try to put it in spaces where I think the birds are most safe. And that's, you try to learn and try to listen and see what works. And that also allows me to have, generally the carbohydrate foods are best to put on the ground, and your fatty foods and protein foods are good to put up in the air. And they do mix, but Heather's lists there are excellent at making selections. The next slide is just showing some of the specialty foods. So the specialty, what I mean by this is the type of food, it's a high quality food. And so if you put out 2 pounds of it, if you have a lot of birds, the 2 pounds will be gone by the morning. And it's often not affordable to have this quality of food that you can put out in huge quantities. So in this photos, I'm showing a bag of high quality food from Wild Birds Unlimited, plus some small tray feeders that I'm able to put out. This is an example. I just put a handful into the tray feeder, and then I let the birds have at it. And then an hour later, when it's gone, I'll put out another handful. In another photo in the lower right, you'll see that I've got summer food here. I've got orange slices for northern oriole and catbird. And when they're empty, I then use those as my spoonful of jelly feeder, so that by the end of the day, they've had some oranges, they've had some jelly, and then they get recycled and they get fresh the next day. So this, again, is just encouraging those small amounts on a routine basis. And then I've got what I call interactive bird feeders, which encourages me to get out closer. So these are small cups, or I will use just, I'll put some of the high quality food. In this case, I'm putting and showing some on the right food bark bits. This is suet bits that is on a railing. So I just put a handful out on the railing, and I'm able to sit out on the deck and watch the birds come into the railing. On the left, I've got a small ceramic cup feeder that I actually have been working on that as a macrame holder that can allow 1 or 2 birds to come in at a time. So now on the next page, the question is, what was interesting for me was when you get interactive with birds, it means how do you get a relationship with them? And it might be very one way, but to me, it fosters getting closer to birds, learning and understanding the beauty of birds, and being able to get up close and seeing their characteristics. And that's all about love and being able to understand that and being able to appreciate that. The other example is, how do we do it? Is that really how do you pay attention to each bird's unique qualities and spending more time near your feeders? And that develops patience. And so I encourage you to try it if you're comfortable with it, and to be able to notice which birds are individual and how can you notice the difference between them. Next slide is that, to me, the one way, if I were to give instructions, I would say, whether it's at your window or you just move your chair right outside your window, outside your door, in weather that's appropriate, with protection from sun and rain that's appropriate. That if you go out when times that work that aren't too hot or too cold, a place that works, which means that it's safe for you out of the sun and elements, and safe for the birds, which means that they've got a safe path, which is a perch or an entrance. So for them, they're looking an extreme amount for hawks, for other predators, from cats. And so they need lots of perches, they need shelter. So it's appreciative for them to meet you in a spot and come closer on perches so that they feel safe and are safe. So this, and then on the next slide, I show, the ability here to be able to have a small feeder. If you have a steady hand, you can hold it up on a branch, and there they have a whole tree to provide perching for them where they can come up. Here I have some tree feeders that are able to feed with me from cups. And then the ground feeders I've come that will just come up close. And on those are the ones I'll throw shelled peanuts to. So it'll be, whether it's the blue jay or the red-bellied woodpecker or cardinals will come in, and they feel safe enough to come in some days, and some days they just want me to leave the food and then walk in. And so respecting their boundaries is critical, because you only develop that trust by being out there. And for me, it's been every day for years outside with the birds and spending hundreds of hours out, that they know who I am and where I go. And I stay in specific spaces so that they know and can predict where I am. Next, what I will talk about further is a lot of this is considered what we call contact feeding. And when I typically choose to use a cup so that they can land on a feeder that I'm holding, or holding typically up against a branch or a railing, so that they can come in as they please, and I am able to observe closer. And so this does include risks, and so I encourage you to understand, what the risk might be as far as people with immune system issues, or for the birds. There are people that have concerns about birds who lose fear of humans becoming too acclimated, and I want you to be aware of that. And I encourage you, do your research, discuss your goals for feeding with an ornithologist to learn more. And I had the good fortune of talking to several ornithologists and just sharing my approach with them and my safety concerns, and was able to have good feedback from them. So I was able to gain confidence that for the way I was pursuing with my species, with my yard and my circumstance, that we discussed it, and I felt confident I could move forward. But I encourage everybody to do your own introspection on this. And then I'll just share a few more things here. So the next slide is a picture of a black-capped chickadee named Oreo. And I say, how do you get to know birds? With chickadees, I call it the chickadee barcode, and on their breastplate, between their bib and their breastplate, is a merging of the black feathers and white feathers. And you can look at the disturbance there and understand which birds are which. Often by that often it's completely undescribable, but if you have a bird that has a little bit of a discrepancy there, it's a joy because you can say, oh, that's so-and-so. Oreo would also always land with one foot and then put the other foot down. And she would come in from a great distance. So she was like a falcon, would come in from 100 yards away. And so if I knew a bird coming in straight at me from 100 yards away, it was going to be Oreo that would land on the cup. And so I got to know her by those traditions. The very first bird I got to know was Napoleon, and he was missing tail feathers from some type of skirmish or accident. And so that was a gift for me in the process of regrowing his tail feathers. I could always determine who he was. I started to get confidence that I could get to know birds by their thing. Since then, now, for example, downy woodpeckers, I can recognize by their voice and their singing pattern. I can recognize birds by which order that they arrive. So in the blue jays, I recognize them not by sight or sound, but just who arrives first is typically the same. They have different cautionary patterns in the way that they look to left and right while they're scoping out before they decide to come in. I know which bird is which because some birds take 2 minutes to come in, some take 20 seconds to come in. And their food preferences, like the one thing with chickadees, Oreo here, for example, would only eat the shelled sunflower seeds. Could have a cup of walnuts and peanuts, and she would peck, and look at me and just bang on the side of the cup until I went into the house, got more sunflower seeds, and came back out again, and then she would eat. So the now picture here is a female young rose-breasted grosbeak named River, and the tips I would say here is get better quality food, provide it in small quantities, and provide it many times each day. And by having this, you're able to provide a safe, reliable source of nourishment. And that through doing that, you get the trust. You might not know what the bird's like. So on the next page is one of my experiments, and it's a back of a carpeting that I divided up into squares. And I just wrote on the back of the carpeting with numbers, and I put out different types of bird feed on there. So in the photo, you'll see a downy, you'll see some of the other birds just picking at different foods. And from that, I got to learn what was popular for those birds that day, that season, at that time of day. So experimenting makes it fun. I'm also a curious person, so that helped me understand what I could be providing that was more enjoyable and that met their nutritional needs for that time of year. Next is another picture of a chickadee. I work outside quite a bit, and this is my laptop. And when you get trust from birds, if you don't have food immediately there for you, they'll just sit and wait for you to provide food. But oftentimes, this picture is of Baker. Baker had 3 other feeders that day that had plenty of food in them, and he was just curious about what I was doing. So because I'm in the same spot every day for hours, he knows it's a trustworthy spot. I will tell you with chickadees, if I have one spot in the woods that I go to, that the chickadees know I go to, I meet them there. If I move 10 feet away and hold the exact same food, they will not show up. And so it's a combination of who you are, where you are, and what you're doing. And if you diverge from that, the birds will not show up. It's been fascinating. You go back 10 feet over to the same tree, and then, oh, that's who he is. And then, so that's good to know. So that's one of the things about behavior that I've come to learn. So again, I hear what worked for me was spending more time standing close to the feeders and paying attention and listening to the birds, accepting for them and not expecting them to have any behavior, but just allowing birds to be birds helped me calm down. It was very meditative for me. And then I'll just close out and just saying really the words have for me been limitless. A picture here is of me at my side door. I think not to me, it's my side door. And it's a picture of a northern oriole named Van Gogh that's sitting on the lip of the screen door. I had just gotten back from a trip, and it was 3 or 4 days back from his normal return from migration. Van Gogh came in and was very hungry and was wanting to know where the jelly feeder was. And so it was just a joy to see the birds. I knew I was away on his scheduled return, so I was eager to get back. And when I got back, no doubt that morning, he came and knocked on the window and asked for jelly and oranges after coming thousands of miles. To know that he came back to this space was just such an honor and privilege to be there for
Wow.
the birds. So thank
That's
you.
incredible, Mark. I'm going to share, whoops, I'm going to go back. Nope, nope, nope. Wrong way, wrong way. And share Mark's information in case you're interested in learning more about in having relationships with individual birds that you're feeding. I have to say, Mark, your pictures, and the way that you talk about it, it's so clear that the birds have a great amount of trust that they have built with you. And
Yeah.
I can only imagine the gentle nature that you bring to it.
Thank you.
So, friends, we are at the end of our time. We had hoped to have enough time for a Q&A. We're not going to have time tonight for a Q&A, but Heather, thank you for answering so many questions in the chat. If there are questions that haven't yet been answered, we will happily answer those and send them out via email. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I am hopeful that Maggie, you will help us out by pulling 3 names, labeling them 1, 2, and 3. You can do one at a time if you want, however you'd like to do it. As you do that, you already ready?
No, that was
Okay.
even someone else.
Awesome. I was just going to share that Eric and Heather, if you all want to turn your videos back on, I just want to thank you so much for having put all of this together. And I want to remind folks, I think all of our presenters tonight said this, that you can feed or observe birds from any place. If you have a balcony, if you have a tiny yard, if you have a window, there are fantastic suction cup feeders that you can even put on a window if you have no outdoor space. So I just wanted to remind folks that backyard birding is often the most accessible birding. And Eric, to thank you for naming our joys, those accessible joys. It was just such a terrific reminder to us of how we can be in relationship with birds in lots of different spaces.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you to
Thank
Birdability.
you all.
And
Thanks, Kat.
Maggie, I think you have names for us.
So I do. I have 3 winners this evening for the
Woohoo!
prizes that you described earlier, Kat.
Awesome.
Our first winner, generated at random, is Jerry B.
Jerry, you win a Birdability merchandise package, which is either a t-shirt or a hat. I'll be in touch with you to figure that out, as well as stickers and a patch. And we're so excited that you won
And
it.
so am I.
Right on. Congratulations, Jerry.
Our second winner this evening, again generated at random, is Jeffrey D. Cristofaro.
Oh, Jeffrey, awesome. You have won an owl print, a one-of-a-kind owl print from an artist, Brittany Nothen, and that will be coming out to you. I am so excited. Yay. And Jeffrey and Jerry, I know where to find both of you, which I'm delighted about. And then our third winner tonight,
Yes.
Maggie, who do we have?
Our third winner this evening is Cassandra Dean.
Cassandra won the Beak View feeder with the solar panel. Amazing. Congratulations, Cassandra Dean. I know where to find you as well. I am so excited that Birdability Week Night 1 has been such a delightful opportunity to be in community. I look forward to having those of you who are joining us tomorrow night for the accessible, for making nature journaling accessible. We'll see you and talk to you there. Don't forget, if you are attending, please bring whatever materials you use to be creative. That might be a digital recorder, it might be your own journal, it could be stickers, whatever it is that you use, Procreate, any of it. And we look forward to talking nature journaling tomorrow night. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you so much for being here. Happy Birdability Week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, all.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you, everybody.